Hello, this is Shreya, and I'm a mobile app developer, specifically React Native developer. And apart from that, I'm also contributing my skills as a React Native developer to including a year of freelancing. I have done skills my contributed my skills at Grow too, and apart from that, I'm building my community called Women Mobile Devs. So we are here, like I'm very excited to be here at React Nexus conference, and also we will be like meeting our fellow developers and make this day a memorable one. Okay, so here we are here like we will be discussing about React Native Web. So what is React Native Web? First of all, so before that, like we will be discussing around React Native Web, what are the challenges we have faced when we will be integrating that to our React Native applications, and what are the like UI and UX experience with that, and apart from that, what's the performance issues we face. So basically, what is React Native Web? So React Native Web is especially like when we will be building React Native web applications. Okay, so it is like used for making React Native web applications through React Native, and by using React Native APIs and components. So other than that, it is like best for React devs to build React Native web applications using React Native. Okay, so let's after that, let's invite our guest. So now we have Shoaib Khan from Flipkart, and Mo from Theodo, and that Nishan from Showtime, and Meenu Makar from Geeky Ants. So let's introduce, we will be starting from the Shoaib Khan.
Hello, hey, hi everyone. So yeah, myself Shoaib. I work as a senior UI engineer at Flipkart. So I'm a part of the core web platform team at Flipkart, and I have been working here since the last 4 years. So yeah, pretty excited about the work that we do here, mostly like with React Native and React Native Web, apart from like in general web stuff.
Hey everyone, so as Shreya mentioned, my name is Mo. I am the head of mobile at Theodo. We have another company called BAM that does a lot of React Native open source, so you might know us from there. I actually built my first mobile app when I was 13 in Objective-C. It was a very bad app, but it somehow got onto the App Store, so apologies if you downloaded it and you didn't like it. Yeah, these days we're doing a lot of universal apps, so that means that under the hood we're using React Native for web quite a bit. And so it's been an interesting experience, and the superpowers that you unlock for it, let's just say it like that, and the faster product delivery is something that I'm very excited about. So great to be talking about this on the panel.
Yep. Hi everyone. So my name is Nishan. I work at an app called Showtime. So we have a universal code base. Our app is open source. Our design system is open source. You can check it out on GitHub, and we share our design system across web, iOS, and Android. So yeah, would love to talk about this and excited. Yeah.
Hi, I am Meenu. I work as a software developer at Geeky Ants. I am in a team called BlueStack. You must have checked the booth. So mainly we work on universal design systems and the component libraries. Yeah, that's about it.
So thank you all for introducing yourself. So let's start from Shoaib. So like as we heard, like Flipkart has migrated their web application from React to React Native. So I wanted to like, can you share some insights about that?
Yeah, so basically we have been very early adopters of React Native and React Native Web. So I guess for apps, right, React Native was like adopted way back, like I would say around 5-6 years back. We started, we saw that React Native was providing a lot of goodness, right, for apps wherein you could have a lot of code sharing between Android and iOS, and you could ship faster, obviously because you don't have to build things twice. We wanted to bring the same goodness to web as well, right? So our applications target 4 channels, mainly Android, iOS, M-site, and web. By web I mean desktop, right? So the desktop website, right? So we did the migration for M-site 4 years back, right, to React Native Web. We started with a couple of pages, and it was like the journey was initially like, you know, the migration was, I guess it faced a lot of challenges. Anyways, whenever you do a migration, you would face challenges, right? But yeah, once React Native Web was in place, right, we saw a lot of goodness in terms of how quickly we could ship features, right? Because when you're moving fast and building fast, you don't have time to, you know, like build things twice on different platforms, right? So the gains were primarily in agility, and most of the time things used to work out of the box with not a lot of changes, right? And native devs could also build features on web, right? Specifically M-site. So yeah, the journey has been good till now for React Native Web.
Okay, thank you, Shoaib. So, like, will you please tell us about the design system? What are you using in that?
Okay. So we have our own design system that we have built. It's we call it Flipkart's DLS. But yeah, it's our own design system. So it kind of uses, you know, like our styling tokens, our styling properties, which we want to apply as per our design language, which has been, you know, defined by our design teams, on top of the core React Native components, right? So say you have your view component in React Native, right? So we have put together our own wrappers on top of the view to fit our use cases, to fit our design language. Yep.
So, by the way, before that, what was the design system you will be using, like you were using in that?
Before that, I don't think we had any specific design system. It was mostly I wouldn't say spaghetti, but yeah. Everyone used to build their own way. Like there was no, you had reusable components, but no design guidelines as such.
Okay, thank you. So Mo, I have a question for you. So will you share your experience with React Native Web? Like what's the experience?
Yeah, sure. So we started looking at React Native for web as a company quite early on. This was at a time when it was being mainly used by Twitter Lite, and there was a conversation, this is maybe back in 2019, there was a conversation around whether or not it was at a point of maturity where it could be used. And I think ultimately everyone reached that conclusion at that point that it wasn't. For various reasons. There was accessibility concerns. At that point, SSR was virtually impossible from a pragmatic point of view. And there was other players in the game to try to get the primitives mapped across web and mobile. So you could use universal styled components, and at that point that was one of the best options, but again, there was many issues riddled within it. As time progressed, I think some of that sentiment has unfortunately stuck around. So you still talk to people about React Native for web, and they kind of think of the 2019, 2020 age. But I think if you're part of this community now, what you'll see is in the last year or so, we've reached a point where there is actually a lot that's happening in this space. Nicholas Gallagher obviously works at Facebook now, and he's maintaining React Native for web, but that's just the primitive layer. You've got so much that's being built in this ecosystem. And I think that was one of the things that I was trying to touch on in the talk. There's UI libraries that are happening. There's ways where you can create a common set of design tokens. There's places where there's libraries for navigation. And that space is becoming a lot more mature. So we've started coming back to universal apps now, and it's one of the things that our team is championing a lot. We are working on quite a few projects that we're using universal apps for. The approach that I think is most fitting these days for us is creating a design system, as you mentioned. I think this is, if you look at Twitter's blog on universal design components as well, they did something like this. So they've defined sort of atomic design components, and they use that across web and mobile. And then they leave some of the layouting and stuff to be separate from each other, which we can talk about if you'd like. But it's really to try to get that core feel and that core essence the same across the board. And I think it's a really powerful approach, as you said. I wouldn't even say it's you get 2 for 1, you get 3 for 1, because you're already using React Native for Android and iOS. Add web into the mix, and suddenly you've got something incredibly powerful.
Sure. Thank you. So apart from that, like, what are the layout methods do you use in your React Native apps? Yeah.
So it comes down to a point of philosophy, I think, more than anything. Layouting on web and mobile are fundamentally different, right? You're dealing with a different set of screen real estate, and navigation from a layouting perspective feels and looks quite different on web and mobile, and users come to expect that. If you look at the approach that Twitter takes, to go back to the same example here, Twitter does not share layouting. They don't even share what common components live on the same screen. So if you go into the Twitter app on your iPhone right now, you'll see that the home page has your feed, and then the search tab has the search and whatever is trending. On web, that's all in one single screen. So even the components that live and the logic that lives and the workflows that live are different, right? And so I think that's the crux of it. I'm of the opinion personally, and this is very debatable, we have other people in the company who don't agree with me, and that's okay, that layouting is something that you should keep separate. Because you will have to compromise on one platform or the other if you don't. So that's my personal opinion about layouting.
Yeah, sure. So, so Nishan, I have a question for you. Can you share your insights on React Native Web? Have you used? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So I remember the first I came across React Native Web, I was inspecting Twitter's web app, like right-click and inspect element, and I saw React Native style sheet styles in it. And I tweeted about it, and even Bacon replied that because Twitter's web client is using React Native for web. So yeah, that's how I came across React Native for web, and I started looking into it. So what it's doing essentially, the view maps to div, as Sanket mentioned in the talk. And after that, I started using in some of my apps, and also I was working with native-based team. So we like dived very deep into its source code and looked how it works. There were a lot of limitations earlier. For example, you can't pass class name to the underlying div. So that's why server-side responsive styles were not working, because dimensions would be computed on client side. So there were some limitations like this, but they are resolved now with 0.18 release of React Native Web. You can pass classes to div. So yeah, and after that, I worked on design system, native base, and also at Showtime. So in Showtime, we are using most of the atomic components, as Mo mentioned, that in our design system, there's buttons, form components, and accordions, and things like that are not layout. So we are reusing it across all the platforms, and for layout, we are writing some web-specific code, and for iOS, Android, we are writing some native-specific code. So yeah, if you open showtime.xyz and download showtime.xyz on iOS or Android, you will see the mobile web and native entirely looks same, because it uses like 90% of code across all the platforms. So the web app looks just like the native app. But when we go to desktop view, then you need some conditional layout code. So that's where we are doing some different web-specific things. Yeah.
Okay, so how did you manage that accessibility feature across the platform? Like,
yeah, so again, in React Native, there was no ARIA prop support. It has its own accessibility value, accessibility check. Again, I worked on the library React Native ARIA, as Sanket mentioned. So there we were essentially mapping accessibility to ARIA prop on web, and to accessibility values on native side. So, but with recent, there's a discussion going on React Native repo that they are adding ARIA props to React Native. So now all the ARIA prop will work on React Native as well as on React Native Web. So it will follow the web accessibility standard. So yeah, right now, I mean, we can just use ARIA hyphen labels, ARIA hyphen props on native, and it will work on all the platforms. So yeah, but earlier we used to use some specific platform specific. We used to write some platform specific hooks to manage accessibility across across all the platforms.
Okay, sure. So, Meenu, I have a question for you. How's your experience with React Native Web?
So we go by the code, write once and run anywhere. So we were on the way to make things easy for developers. So we experimented with universal component libraries that works everywhere. Yeah, there were issues with React Native Web because web works very differently, and the native code is like on JS mostly. So we had to like write things for web specific, like we had to run so many things on CSS level, not on JS. So these were the issues. We solved it by a few optimizations on GlueStack style, and I was also working on native base prior. So native base, we had to deal with such complications back then, but now it is mostly resolved. So yeah.
So, what are the challenges you faced when you removed that native base and you shifted to GlueStack? Like,
So yeah, as I told, like on native base, when I was running the responsive code, basically the responsiveness was handled on JS level on the web in native base. But in GlueStack, we compiled it through CSS, and we generated some data styles that we injected on web. So it is on CSS level now. That was one issue. Other than that, there was accessibility issues also. Like we had to manage, like we were having React ARIA for web, but for native we had to like manually do a lot of things. So because when we run code on like same code on both the platforms, the things are different. And like Mo was mentioning, the layout is different. I think that is more of a responsive issue than like native and web, because on web and when we run the code on browser, we also have that search and etc. on, like we had to manage a lot of things. Yeah, so I think it's more sorted now, and everybody wants to run like write once and not do the double task.
so what's the major challenge you faced in that while migrating from native base to GlueStack?
The challenge was to mainly optimize the performance. That was.
Okay. Okay. So Ishan, I have a question for you. You have also worked with mono repos, right? So, like, how do you handle the code base across the platform, like in a mono repos? How do you handle that?
So actually, Mo again mentioned this in his talk regarding monorepos. So we have exactly similar setup for Showtime's app. There's app directory, and inside there it's expo directory and next directory. So on web we are using Next.js, and on native we are using expo. And then there's a design system folder that includes all our design system that we reuse across all the platforms. So yeah, the structure is mostly similar, and you can get like really good templates now. So there's a template for Turbo Repo, Next, and Expo. So you can use it and yeah, bootstrap your app with that.
So you said you worked with like Expo mainly. So like what are your plans when in Expo 50 coming 50 they are removing that Webpack? So what are your plans like to manage your code base in that?
I think Expo for web is using Webpack, right?
Yeah.
But we are not using Expo web on our at Showtime. We are using Next.js. So yeah, we are not using like directly Expo web on.
Okay.
So it won't affect us.
Sure. Okay. So I have a question for Mo. So, like, what are the parameters you decide when you choose like this is the React Native app, and what are the parameters you decide like for the layout? For this application, we will be layouting for this app. Like, what will be the layout
Sure.
pattern?
So on the React Native question, I mean, if we need a mobile app, then it's going to be React Native, right? That's usually the conversation that we have. I think maybe the more interesting conversation that we usually have with clients is, do you need a React Native for web application? Like, do you need to use React Native for web? And that conversation is around, one, if they're mobile first, because regardless of whether we like it or not, in reality, there is added overhead of using React Native for web and using React Native for a web application. Like, if 95% of your users are web, just use an Next.js app in React, right? So the conversation then that we have is, how important is mobile? Is it the primary focus point? Because if it is, and in a lot of cases it is nowadays, like the amount of mobile devices, especially I've learned in India, apparently during COVID, you guys had phones being handed out to everyone for schools and stuff like that. That's great, because it means that everyone in society is becoming mobile first, right? So in a situation like that, then you need to build mobile first, right? That's the only way that your app succeeds. And so we have that conversation with our clients. You know, if somebody's trying to build an app that is like a desktop, like a desktop-based application, then it doesn't make sense, right? It's only when it's mobile first. So that's the first thing. In terms of the layouting, again, it's how much do you want to tweak and tailor for it to have desktop-specific implementations in certain places. Now, in terms of where layouting is different, I think there are core parts to it which are different, and you need to have that conversation, right? So the navigation bit is actually probably the simplest example that I can think of, right? Users using a mobile app have a certain expectation of where certain things live in terms of maybe they're in separate tabs, and you can't share a layout and do that because they're different screens in the mobile application. So you can try to share as much as you can. The issue that will then be faced is at some point you're going to have to make a compromise. Either you make some screens that aren't great on web, or you make some screens that aren't great on mobile, but someone's going to suffer in the process. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
Yes, it is. I have a question like for all of you guys. Has anyone of you used like work with Webpack Module Federation or something?
So not entirely in like our use cases. Webpack Module Federation, I don't think it would be a good fit for us, since we have very dynamic pages, right? Very dynamic layouts. And it would be difficult for us to split our app into, you can say, mini micro front ends, right? So we haven't explored it yet. But yeah, in general, I feel it's like a very interesting concept, and worth trying out for those who feel that micro front ends is a way to go forward.
So not specifically Webpack Module Federation, but I think a really exciting thing that's happening in the React Native space is the fact that Metro can weekly resolve bundles now. That is going to be massive, because whilst this isn't built yet, what you can effectively do is you can load JavaScript bundles on the React Native engine weekly and kind of resolve that as and when you need some code, right? It's going to be huge. And it's going to take a few months. I think people are still coming around to this, but once people come around and understand how to use it for this purpose, you can effectively have micro frontends for mobile, right? And that's really exciting. Now the Webpack Module Federation, I think that will become the primary conversation in the mobile space in React Native, because obviously you need Hermes for resolving it on native phones, right?
I haven't used it. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So, do you have anything to share about, like, what are the challenges maybe, or maybe you might have solved some major problem, and Nishan also, like, contributed in so many open source projects. So, like, any one of you can share what are the challenges, or maybe how did you resolve that?
Yeah, so in React Native there was like flex gap property missing. So I worked on it, co-authored with Jacob Parker. So we did a PR on React Native, on Yoga layout to add the gap property in React Native. And after that I did a PR for adding bindings for iOS and Android. So now you can use gap property in React Native. And it was already working on React Native Web, but in React Native it was missing. So yeah.
Thank you for your service.
Yeah, sure.
So, like, in general, right, when it comes to challenges with React Native Web, so a lot of time, a lot of the CSS inbuilt features, right, or even the new and upcoming features which are getting added to CSS won't be available right away on React Native Web, because first they have to be, you know, like, they have to be in sync with React Native, right? And if mobile already doesn't have that, then it's very difficult to add that support in only React Native Web, right? So a lot of the out-of-the-box CSS features, like let's say you want to use container queries, which is very new, right? You cannot use container queries right away if you are using React Native Web, right? Because you are restricted by the framework of React Native, right? So there is no concept of container queries on mobile. So React Native Web can also become constrained in that way, that a lot of the web native CSS features won't be available right away until and unless, you know, you have some sort of a matching API available to you. So that is one of the challenges which I think we have faced a lot, wherein we would have to build support for features which are only web native. Like for example, take an example of picture tag, right? So React Native doesn't have multiple image support. Like if you want to use multiple sources for an image, you won't be able to do that, right? But it kind of becomes essential for web, wherein you have different viewports, different sizes, and you might want to use different sources for your images for different viewports, right? So inherently the picture tag kind of solves it for you, but React Native Web till now doesn't support it. So you either go ahead and build your own image component which kind of supports multiple sources for your images, and that is what we actually did in our applications.
I think you need to decide whether your app is web specific, like web first or native first, because I can think of one example, like shadows work very differently on native and web. When we try to match it up and make a universal library, so we had to add shadows, and like on Android there is elevation property that works, and on web there are a lot of things that like box shadows are there, and we can do a lot of things. So we cannot match it to that level. Yeah, so that was also a kind of challenge.
Sure.
That's really interesting to me, right? Because one of the things that I think is really important with universal apps and specifically library makers is trying to, and this is something that Fernando Rojo does really well, trying to respect the platform-specific implementations, whether that be from styling or UI elements or user interactions. And so I wonder if, as library creators, that is the target, or it's to try to make things look the same by and large across all platforms. So the example that comes to my mind is Zigo. raise of hands, has anyone seen Zigo? It's a library for context menus in React Native. Not one person. Have you seen it? Okay. Oh, you contributed to Zigo. Okay, cool. It's contributed to everything. Okay. So Zigo does this really neat thing where it's a very simple library in theory, right? It's an abstraction layer on how you handle menus. It has a common API, but under the hood it renders an Android context menu, an iOS context menu, and a Radix context menu on web, right? And they don't necessarily match in styling, but that's the intended goal of the library. So maybe a question for you is as part of the BlueStack team, how are you guys approaching that? How much are you prioritizing native-specific implementations versus trying to make sure that everything looks and feels and behaves the same way across all three?
For that, I can think of, like, we have a modal component, and we were giving, an option for the user to use how RN does it. So we have a prop, something, use RN modal. Again, it is again user specific how he wants to use it, and maybe he wants he wants the modal to look similar on both native and web. Maybe he wants to retain the feel of native modal to it. So basically, I think these things should be flexible and not we cannot fix one thing and assume that everybody will use it because, yeah.
Yeah, so again, Zigo, I worked on the Android implementation of it, and sometimes you need platform-specific UI, and sometimes you want to create your custom ones. React Native has those primitives using that you can create custom ones, but then you also need to match the behavior. For example, if you create a custom modal using an absolute view, but then it should close on pressing hardware back button on Android. So you need to take care of all those things. So React Native has all the primitives of building a custom UI, but you need to make sure that you match the, respect the behavior of what it should do. So even on React Native Web, there's web area spec, how a modal component should behave, how menu component should behave. So similarly, native components have some spec that it should close on back button, it should work on voiceover. When a modal opens, the focus should shift on the first element. So if you are building a custom one, then you need to make sure that you follow all the guidelines of accessibility, and same goes for web. So if you are using React Native for web and React Native across, then you need to know, if you are you need to know how all the components behave everywhere. That's how you can create best experience for all the users. Yeah. So it's not a solution that you write a view and just render it directly on web. It won't work properly. You will face a lot of disappointments if you just try to run a code written for React Native, and if you try to run directly on React Native Web, you will face disappointment for sure. So you just sometimes it's required that you know about all the platforms, how things work. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So apart from that, you must be using animations in your React Native apps. So for that, what do you mostly use?
So for animations, we kind of use we use a custom animation library, which is again built in a declarative way, but it's again a custom implementation. But apart from that, for animations, right? I think Reanimated is pretty cool, right? I have heard folks talk a lot about Reanimated.
So yeah, for certain, on the mobile side, Reanimated is almost a necessity when you're dealing with user user-created animations, i.e. you need to track where something's being panned, or it needs to be on interaction with the user. So definitely that. Tamaguri has a really nice animations engine now as well. So I think that works across web and mobile, and it's very nice to get working, and it's quite simple in terms of the API. So I think those two are quite good for universal applications. So I guess my frame of reference is usually, is it based off of user interactions, or does it need to handle and adapt with the user interaction? If it is, reanimated, else Tamagui, or you could also use animated. That's always an option.
So,
We, in like GlueStack UI components, we were using Legend App Motion. That is working pretty well for us. Yeah.
Yeah, so reanimated library that works on React Native Web, but it also adds some bundle size. There's like, I don't remember exactly the numbers, but it does add some bundle size. So you need to see like if you want to use, or native animated API works on web, so you can always use that. Yeah.
okay. So, Shoaib, when you were building that animation library, so what are the challenges, like main challenges you faced while building, and how did you resolve that?
So I didn't build the animation library like someone, like it was a team effort. So, but yeah, we are building on top of the animated, React Native animated, right? So it's kind of like built, as far as I know, it's built in a declarative way, wherein you declare what animations you want in some sort of a JSON format, right? And the wrappers, like whatever animations are supported by the library, they automatically kind of like cascade all of those behaviors, right? Like say you want to do fade in, fade out, followed by some other transition, right? So all of those are taken care by the declarative library itself, wherein you declare the entire format of the animation that you want, and it takes care of it. One thing which I forgot to mention is we also use Lottie a lot for animations. So yeah, Lottie is also there.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so have you guys also worked with Skia library?
Yeah, Skia is great. Admittedly, I haven't tried to use it in a web and mobile application. So this is only coming from mobile, but it's quite nice, especially when you're trying to do complex animation, complex graphics and render them, and then you can pair it with reanimated, and you get some really, really cool animations. I think there's a guy on Twitter who exclusively just does Skia animations and gets like hundreds of likes just by doing some really, really nice animations. So it's really quite nice, and I think any like abstract visualization that you want to do, it's a really good option.
Okay, so these are the questions which I had. So let's wrap up with this. Or if any other story do you want to share with our audience, you can also share it. Yes, we have.
Any audience questions? Apparently we have time. Aditya, do you want to? I'll give him.
What do you think about the new architecture and migrating your app to it?
For React Native?
Yes.
Okay, so right now, okay, so migrating is, the React Native core is, so React Native core has an example RN tester app that already runs on Fabric, new architecture. And if you want to migrate your app, then you need to see your package.json if those packages are migrated or not, right? But there's a proposal in React Native repo. I think you can use proposal for backward compatibility. So you can use those packages that are not yet migrated and in the new architecture. So, but to be honest, I haven't migrated yet, so I don't know the benefits. Yeah, I need to migrate it first and do some testing, and then I'll report. Yeah.
Just on that proposal, I think it's actually now part of 72 as well. So you can, it's unsafe, like it's not recommended for anything production, but you can try the backwards compatibility across the two now. So it's an option, yeah.
Thanks for that.
Any other from audience? I don't think so.
Last
Okay.
words?
Let's use React Native Web and React Native. Let's use the common code base and React Native and React Native Web. That's.
So usually there'll be many platform-specific new features, right? For example, in React Native, we have new architecture. And in web, maybe we'll get like React Server components or many other possible features, right? So how will like React Native Web have both the improvements from both the platforms? Like, will you be missing out on some enhancements or how will?
So people have already attempted to figure out how server components fits within the world of React Native. Evan Bacon did like a POC. I think he spent like an evening on it and just in true Evan Bacon fashion just got it out. I don't know how this man operates, but he's a legend. And so I think there's a core fundamental incompatibility, and I think this is my opinion. People can feel free to challenge this. I think there's going to be a very quick diversion between React and React Native. And maybe that means that we need to rethink some of this React Native for web stuff, but RSCs are kind of quite far away from the direction of where mobile apps are. Because fundamentally with a mobile app, things live on client side, and you don't typically pass data over the air. We do have over-the-air updates, but they, to some degree, actually go against App Store regulations. It's a very gray area. So once you start to actually have the components live on the server and you're passing them and streaming them across, it starts to become quite murky on mobile. And so how do we evolve from here? I think there's going to be a divergence. I think the teams are going to go in very separate directions, and it's yet to be seen how that's going to have an effect. I'm interested to see how RSCs fit in the world of React Native. I don't see a clear path towards it. Yeah.
So originally, a React Server Components pack was written for React Native. There's a discussion in GitHub that originally it was for React Native, but there was, I don't know, not much investment into it. So then they implemented it for the web first. So I think there won't be much diversion, but I think React Native will eventually support React Server Components. And already few people gave talk about server-driven UI, right? So this is similar to that. I mean, it's not much different. You can render server tree from your server and client can render it. So yeah, again, originally the spec was for React Native, but then it was implemented for React for web first. So yeah.
I am curious on your thoughts and everybody else as well. Like, how do you get around the App Store regulations? Like, you are not allowed to add any extra functionality, period, right? Without actually going through an App Store update. So fundamentally, you have that control with RSCs to the full degree, right? So how do you play around that paradigm shift? That's the bit that from a tech perspective, it's totally possible. From a practicalities perspective around how app stores are governed, I think that's the bigger challenge that I have towards it.
Yeah, I mean, that can be answered by Apple. I am not sure. But, I mean, a code push is just like that. You can change the entire app overnight. And App Store will ban you, like, if your app changes. So, I mean, it's their problem. I don't know. But already you can pass a JSON, and on client side, you can build some sort of engine and do the UI. I mean, they can't do anything if you do that. Even you can put some conditional that if it's reviewed by App Store, then do some other UI and give them wrong credentials and give them a different app because they use your credential to review the apps, right? Yeah, I won't, but I'm just saying. So, I mean, they will just ban the app. People will complain and report, and that's what will happen. So, yeah.
One thing to add, right? So Nicholas had created a RFC in the React Native forums itself, right, wherein he was requesting for more reduction in fragmentation across how React Native is built and how we should like how web operates in general, right? So he has, like in the React Native web library, right, the code is written in such a way that they have jumped all the hoops for us, right? But it would be nice if the fragmentation is reduced a lot. Like currently there's a lot of fragmentation.
Okay, so let's wrap up with this, and like I also think that for the React devs, that if they want the same look and feel as the mobile app, they should use React Native Web. So yeah, let's wrap up with this. Thank you.